Hey, Icon Church. I'm so excited that you're joining us online this morning. My name is Amanda Martinez, and I am the Next Gen pastor here at Icon. We've been in the middle of a series about family called Bless This Mess. And I cannot tell you how many times I have actually used that phrase in my own experience in family life. Right? Now, if you were here for week 1, you got to hear Dan and Kelly share a little bit about their family life growing up and their relationship with their parents and how it was growing up. And you might have heard Dan talk about how his parents never argued in front of the kids. And my family life was way different. To be honest, my parents had a pretty turbulent marriage. Adding 3 kids on top of that didn't make it any easier. There were a lot of shouting matches, things thrown or said in anger. So yeah, pretty messy. But here's the deal. My parents were not bad people. In fact, they did their very best to raise us with a certain set of values and practices that they prioritized. I think what made it the most messy is that a lot of times those values and those practices never matched up. And seeing as though they weren't the best at healthy communication, they equally made some poor choices that eventually led to the end of their marriage. So when I graduated and in my young adult years started to think about what family would look like, I had to do some work to figure out what I would value most in marriage and family. Now, I will say, being an Enneagram 8, there wasn't a whole lot of guesswork. I was pretty certain I knew what I wanted, how it would go, what I didn't want, and how everything would just play out, right? And there really wasn't a lot of change over the years. So today, we're going to be talking about values and family values and parenting forward. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's take a quick break, and I want you to share with me what were some of the things that your family valued when you were growing up. Was it responsibility, servanthood, financial priorities? Like what were some of the big values that your family instilled in you as you were growing up? Go ahead and drop some words in the comments in the chat and let us know. I want to know what were some things that your family valued as you were growing up. So today, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about parenting forward. And when I say parenting forward, what I mean is making decisions today in your child's life that will invest into their future. Okay? If you're watching today and you're saying, well, I don't want kids and I don't even like kids, that's totally valid and okay. I would simply invite you to stick around and to lean in and to listen because you can still be a part of helping us raise the next generation as well. So for instance, if that's you and if you can encourage a parent on their most difficult days and help them feel human, that in itself is a whole ministry that you could jump into without ever changing your path in life, right? Just because you aren't choosing our particular family destination doesn't mean that we don't need you on this journey, okay? So for me, from a young age, I knew that I didn't want to birth a child of my own. I knew that I wanted to parent through foster care and adoption. And when I was in my mid-20s, I actually left my hometown of Austin, Texas, and moved to Seattle, Washington. And while I was there, I made a promise to myself in my mid-20s that if I wasn't married by the time I was 30, then I was going to move forward as a single foster or adoptive parent. Now, in my late 20s, I actually began dating this really great guy, and our relationship was pretty serious, and we began kind of talking about our future together, and I eventually thought that we were going to get married and adopt kids together. But when we got around to that conversation, he told me that he never wanted to and never would consider himself a foster adoptive dad. That wasn't something that he wanted for his life. So obviously, my heart was pretty broken. After a few more conversations and a great big argument, we just decided it would be best for us to part ways. And it was at that time I gave myself some space to heal. And at that time, I decided that it was about time to start putting my plan and my promise to myself into play. So as I began my foster parenting journey, I prayed and I thought about very deeply what my family values would look like in this context, because now I'm a single 30-year-old mother with no living relatives nearby. At the time, I was a part-time children's pastor at a church in North Seattle, and my other part-time job was at a publications company downtown. And at the same time, I was also a young adult small group leader. And as a foster parent now, all of our family life would fall under the gaze and rule of the Washington DCFS. So yeah, there was a lot to figure out. Thankfully, as a family ministry leader, I already had an excellent blueprint for how our family values might play out. See, I'd already been using something in our ministries called the Orange Strategy. And I had already seen how it worked really well. And I knew that it was something that I wanted to adopt into my own family plans. And you can read more about the Orange Strategy and these 5 family values that we're going to talk about in a book called Parenting Beyond Your Capacity by Reggie Joyner and Carrie Nieuwhof. And in the book, the 5 family values that they highlight are made with Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9 in mind. So let's take a look at those, okay? It says, "Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road, when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." And through this verse, they landed on these 5 family values. And those are: imagine the end, make it personal, create a rhythm, fight for the heart, and widen the circle. And in the book, Reggie Joyner says, "The family exists, even in its imperfection, to display the heart of God to every generation." And I knew that I wanted my child to see and experience the heart of God through the family values that I led with. So a few weeks after my foster license came in, I learned about this amazing young lady that would be coming to stay with me. She's 13 years old, and the more I learned about her, the more I loved her, and the more I loved who I knew she could become. So I fine-tuned our family values and how they would play out now that I knew what she needed the most and what I believed were the best ways to provide those things for her. So whether you're a single parent, you're married, divorced, or separated, or if you're just now beginning to have conversations and think through about what kind of family you want to build, you got to be willing to sift through and define what values you want to prioritize. And it's not too late to make adjustments if you need to. See, the reality of every family is different, but every family goes further when we take the time to make clear distinctions between what matters and what matters the most. Maybe some of these values that I'm going to mention will help you as you define or redefine what your family looks like as you parent forward. Author and speaker Rob Bell and his wife Kristen have an excellent audiobook that's called Launching Rockets that you can download. And in it, they offer great parenting insights, some of which I'm going to weave in moving forward. And they liken parenting to launching rockets, because we as parents are continually packing essential things into our child's life, hoping that it'll be the right fuel to push them forward on a path to help them reach their goals. But in order to know what to pack in, we've got to narrow the focus, right? I'd love to share some things that I've seen, lived, and learned along the way as a parent and as a family ministry leader for the past 20 years. So let's break down how these family values might be beneficial for your family. Let's start with imagine the end. When you imagine the end, you focus your priorities on what matters most. For my family, I imagined an end where no matter how long I was blessed with a child, that they would know that they were known and loved and seen no matter what, and that they were in a safe place where they could be who they truly are. So here are some things that you might consider as you imagine the end. Number one, your first priority is to enjoy your kids. If you see your children as a burden or a chore, no one in your house is going to be happy or fulfilled, right? Have fun with them and learn to laugh and look for joy when things don't go the way you planned. Number two, you want to give them as little to unlearn in the future as possible. For instance, if you're feeling anxious or stressed out, they're going to learn how they should handle it based on how you handle it and how they see you handling it. So if you want to build resilience in them and help them acknowledge the feeling and then think of a way forward and then work through it with them together. Okay? As a parent, there were a lot of times, even in the middle of an argument, that I would look at my daughter and I would say, hey, this is stressing me out and I need to take a break. I would say, I don't want to say anything that I don't mean. And right now, we just need about 20 minutes to just calm down. Let's get back to this in just a little bit. And we go to our separate spaces, whether that's the living room or our bedrooms, whatever. And we would just like take time to calm down and then reconvene because I didn't want to say something that I didn't mean, right? And when my daughter got anxious or stressed out, I would ask her, hey, what is the most stressful for you and what is causing the most anxiety for you right now? And she would tell me, and then I would ask her, what do you need from me right now? Right? Because sometimes all they need is someone to listen to, and sometimes what they need is someone to help them process it and work it out with them. But I really wanted to make sure that that was available to her to show her healthy ways to handle stress and anxiety. And the next thing is you have to realize that you had your path in life and your kids have their own path in life. I never expected my daughter to be just like me or to do the things that I wish that I had done when I was a kid. I wanted her to be her best, fully authentic self. So here, I know next to nothing about sports. And so when my daughter tried out for volleyball, mind you, having never played the sport herself, I cheered her on, right? And when she made the team, we celebrated and we went out and bought all her gear. And then I spent quality time watching games on YouTube so I didn't embarrass her when I was cheering her on in the stands, right? And so that was just a big deal for me to be able to celebrate and honor her path in life, even if it looked different from what I would have preferred, in my own life as a child. Now let's talk about making it personal. When you make it personal, you put yourself first when it comes to personal growth. And I made it personal as a parent by regularly taking time out to do things that would refresh my soul. Whether that was going to a movie by myself or going out to eat by myself and just having some downtime, or whether that meant just putting on some soothing music and reading a book. Even on my most stressful or busy days, I didn't neglect my daily practice of praying before bedtime. Although, if I'm being honest, a lot of times that prayer time looked like this: Jesus, take the wheel because I have nothing left to give today. Right? And that's okay. That's totally okay. But you can make it personal by remembering that, number one, the greatest thing that you can give your kid is to be fully alive yourself. In the audiobook Launching Rockets, Kristen Bell mentions that we shouldn't, as parents, give our kids 100% of ourselves. Instead, we should give 75% of ourselves so that we can still keep pieces of ourselves for ourselves. And then you have to remember that you're always teaching your kid, and sometimes you're using words. Your kids need to be able to consistently see you practice self-care. They need to see you personally develop your faith. They need to see you struggle with answers, face your weaknesses, deal with problems, admit when you're wrong, fight for your marriage, and resolve personal conflict. Another family value is creating a rhythm. When you create a rhythm, you increase the quantity of quality time that you spend together. And I created a rhythm for my daughter and I to eat dinner every night together, distraction-free, so that we could have meaningful conversations about everything and nothing, right? I made sure that we had a family meeting every Sunday evening so that we could celebrate things that made the week great and have equal opportunity to allow each other to share constructive criticism to make the next week better. Because here's what I know. The goal is to keep your kid talking. As part of our eKids and Icon Youth curriculum that we use, there are these resources called Parent Cues, and they look like this. And there's also a Parent Cue app that you can download for free. But we also use them at my church in Seattle. So every night when my daughter and I sat down for dinner, I would take one of the cues that were listed or discussion points on the front, and I would bring it up in our conversation. Not only did that help reinforce what she was learning in youth group, but it also just kept the conversation going. Right? At our table, no topic was off limits, and our relationship grew so much from it. I wanted her to get in the habit of having open dialogue with me. And you also want to look for ways to serve regularly, and that could be inside or outside of the church. When you introduce your kids to opportunities to give back and serve others, it reflects the heart of Jesus and it teaches them gratitude. Not only that, it reminds them that they can do big things in little ways, which is super awesome. So let's move on to the next family value. Fight for the heart. When you fight for the heart, you're communicating in a style that gives the relationship value. Anytime my daughter got angry or upset or frustrated, I fought for the heart. Now, yes, her poor choices did have natural consequences, but I never shamed her for any of the mistakes that she made. And if she had had a blow up the day before and the next day she asked me for something, I said yes without strings attached, right? Forgiveness and second chances were a really big deal in our house. And here's what you have to remember when you fight for the heart is number one, you should be a safe place for your kids to turn to. Practice active listening and lead with grace and understanding. They need to be able to ask you questions without fear. Be willing to give your kids the right to tell you when you are saying or doing something that is hurtful to them without being defensive or dismissive. If you're not someone that they can talk to when they are facing something really difficult, they're going to find someone else to talk to. So you also want to talk to your child like a normal person and use everyday words. Don't shout orders at them or talk down to them. Engage them in a real conversation that's age appropriate and assume that your child can be trusted, okay? Now, if you have a child that's navigating sexuality, please don't demonize them, okay? I have counseled so many teens as they've navigated sexuality, and I've seen the positive difference that it makes in a kid's life when parents, even when they disagree, are willing to genuinely listen and offer compassion for the long haul. Okay. Likewise, I've seen the adverse effects in a kid's life when those conversations are met with anger and shame and resentment. When you demonize the conversation, you inadvertently demonize them, and it causes long-lasting rifts in the relationship. You know, sometimes as parents, it's easy for us to forget that we can win an argument and we can force what we believe is right behavior and lose the heart in the process. So the last family value that we're talking about today is widening the circle. And that's what happens when you pursue strategic relationships for your kids. Now, I widened the circle in our family life by making sure that my daughter had peers and leaders in her life that I could trust to keep her safe and invest in her life, not just relationally, but also spiritually. My daughter chose to volunteer in our kids ministry, and so I knew that she had faith-filled leaders, adults, and teenagers that were willing to help her as she served in the nursery. And she also decided to attend our youth group and had some incredible small group leaders who were always willing to reach out, and they reached out so frequently to invite her out for ice cream, to group hangouts, and just to go shopping and do fun things. So when I was a young adults small group leader at that same time, my daughter knew that during our Bible study time, she would have homework or downtime in her room. But at the end, when we were all done talking and praying, then she would come out and join us. And the young adults in our group were like her big sisters, right? They would brush her hair, braid her hair, give her massages, talk about boys and music, and all the things that she loved. And here are some things that you might consider as you attempt to widen the circle. Number one, realize that you are the biggest influence in your child's life, but you're not the only influence that they're ever going to need in their life. Kids need people in the community that will provide them with a sense of belonging and significance. To piggyback off of that, please be willing to ask for help. Be willing to ask for help from teachers, from counselors, mentors, therapists, small group leaders, people in your small group, and other family members. We need each other. And so many people want to be a real friend and lean in and support. So shut down this narrative of pride and fear that says that you don't need anyone and that you could do this by yourself, okay? Number three, widen the circle wisely. Now, don't surround yourself with people who aren't willing to walk in the trenches with you. Don't welcome in people who are going to parent shame or gaslight you as you do your very best. When I was parenting, I once had a really challenging experience that involved my daughter and an unfortunate result of her triggered behavior. And I just wasn't able to de-escalate the situation quickly enough. And it meant that she would have to be removed from our home for 24 hours per protocol. And that was on a Saturday. And so the next day at church, our youth pastor came up to me, and I was obviously still kind of had tears in my eyes and obviously looked stressed out, I guess, because he came up to me and was like, "Are you okay? What can I do?" So I explained the situation, and he said, "Hey, can me and my wife pray for you?" And I said, "Yeah, obviously, of course, absolutely." So the next thing I know, we're in this side room, and he's invited 10 other women from our church who didn't know our backstory and family experience to come into this room. And he put me on the spot, and he said, "Hey, we're all going to pray for you. Go ahead and tell everyone what happened." And so on the spot, I very reluctantly and very vulnerably did share what had happened. And so after everyone said amen, 3 different women in that group came up to me afterwards, and they told me what I had done wrong, and they told me what I needed to do to fix my daughter. And after they were gone, I took none of their advice, and I didn't invite them to be a part of my circle of friends. Because here's the deal. Parenting is hard enough on its own, and it is a long haul, and you don't need anyone weighing you down who is shaming you for doing your very best, especially if they're not in the arena with you. Just go ahead and kick them back up to the cheap seats where they belong, okay? And then number 4, welcome your child's friends like family. Get to know their friends' parents, because they're going to need a friend too. Even if your child's friends are not the friends that you would have chosen for them, they are a significant part of your child's life at that time. So help your kid be the best friend that they could be to their friends. Now, I was blessed to parent my daughter for 6 months before she had to move on to the next step in her journey. And every minute that was spent with my daughter, from the day that I met her face to face to the day that I had to say goodbye, was so precious and very much treasured. Saying goodbye to her was equal parts miserable and heartbreaking. But I knew that she had some really good fuel to launch her into the next place. So in fact, she actually reached out to me the other day and asked me if I would pray with her about something that she was struggling with. So even on the days that I feel like I worry that I might have messed up somewhere along the way, I know that I did something right. To have had the ability to give a child a safe place to belong, that was a dream come true. And although I'm not currently fostering, it's going to be a part of my future as I carry on. But for now, I get the opportunity to continue to give children and families a safe place to belong and grow and develop together as a next-gen pastor. But what about you? What do you dream of for this next generation? And what will you do to help launch some pretty stellar rockets? Go ahead and type there in the chat. What are some things that you are dreaming big for kids in your family, for your kids as friends, like just for this whole next generation? What are some things that you're dreaming big for them? And then what are you doing to help launch some pretty stellar rockets in your own day and life? Thank you so much for listening and for leaning in as we work together to invest our best in the next generation.